When Judge Celeste Brooks was assaulted in her own courtroom, he kicked her like she was nothing. But she wasn't just anyone, she was the judge, and his target was justice itself. What Detective Sloan didn't know was that Judge Celeste had lost her husband to men like him, and this time, she wasn't walking away. How far will one woman go to bring down a silent system of corruption? Like this story. Share it. Subscribe for more. And now, let's go back to where it all started. It was a Monday morning like any other. At least, that's what everyone thought. Inside Courtroom 3 of Jefferson County Courthouse, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as people settled in, attorneys whispering over folders, jurors shuffling papers, the court clerk typing with that familiar rhythmic clack. Judge Celeste Brooks sat behind the bench, calm as ever, her black robe falling perfectly into place. She was respected not just because she was fair, but because she was unshakable. Then, the hallway erupted. Bang! The courtroom doors flew open so hard they hit the walls with a violent crack. Heads snapped around. Conversations died mid-sentence. Detective Garrett Sloan stormed in, towering, red-faced, white-knuckled. And in his grip, like a rag doll, was a terrified little girl. She was black, maybe 12, maybe 13. Her hoodie was half-zipped, one shoe missing the other, barely hanging on. Her face was blotchy from crying. "Out of my damn way!" Sloan barked, shoving past a court officer. Detective Sloan, the bailiff, tried. "She spat on me!" he roared, yanking the girl forward. Janelle stumbled, nearly falling to the floor. The courtroom gasped. Celeste's eyes sharpened instantly. Detective Sloan. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Let her go! Right now!" Sloan didn't stop. He dragged the girl to the defense table and shoved her into a chair, her head knocking against the wood. "She's a feral little animal," he growled. "Thinks she can disrespect me." "Not today. That child has the right to due process," Celeste said, standing. Her tone was cold steel. "You will release her this instant, or I will have you removed." Sloan turned to her, his face twisted. There was something dangerous in his eyes now, not just anger. Disdain. "She spit on me." "Your Honor," he sneered, "I don't take orders from people who let that slide. You take orders from the law," Celeste snapped, "not your ego." The room tensed. Sloan stepped closer to the bench, seething. "You people always twist everything, always playing the victim. I've served this city for 20 years while judges like you sit up there and let it rot." "That's enough," Celeste warned, raising her hand. "Stand down." And then, it happened. So fast, so brutal, it didn't seem real. Sloan's boot came up with terrifying speed and slammed into Judge Brooks's leg just below the knee. There was a sickening thud, the kind of sound that silences a room. Celeste staggered back. A cry rang out. Papers flew. The clerk screamed. The bailiff rushed forward but froze. No one moved. No one breathed. The judge's hand gripped the edge of her bench. Her breath trembled, but she didn't fall. Didn't scream. Slowly. Celeste stood upright. She looked Sloan dead in the eyes, not with fear, not with tears, with fire. "What you just did," she said. Her voice low, shaking slightly from adrenaline, was an assault. "On this court, on me, and on everything this bench stands for." Sloan laughed. "Go ahead. Press charges," he spat. "Let's see what your badge buys you when no one's looking." He turned to leave. "Take one more step," Celeste said softly, "and I will hold you in contempt." And this time, Detective Sloan, the whole damn world will be watching. And she was right. Because sitting near the back was a young local reporter live streaming the courtroom on her phone. The footage caught everything. The screaming, the dragging, the kick, the judge's staggering rise. Within 30 minutes, the video had over 100,000 views. By noon, it was national. White detective assaults, black judge in open court. What happened to Judge Celeste Brooks? Sparks outrage across America. The kick that rocked Jefferson County. But Celeste didn't make a statement, didn't grant interviews, didn't break down. Instead, she adjusted her robe, turned back to the bench, and looked at the clerk. "Call the first case," she said. "We proceed." And just like that, the courtroom moved on, but nothing would ever be the same. Because that kick wasn't just an outburst, it was a declaration. And Celeste Brooks had just declared without saying a word that she was done staying silent. Detective Sloan sat in the holding room with his hands resting behind his head like he had just finished a round of golf. His badge had been stripped. His gun taken. He had been read his rights by a rookie, no less. And yet, he smirked like he owned the damn place. When the internal affairs officer stepped in and told him the judge was pressing charges, Sloan didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned forward and said coolly, "I've worked with 4 judges before her. You think because she wears a robe and sits a few feet higher, I'm supposed to bow?" He chuckled. "I know how this system works. You don't stay in the game 22 years without learning how to outplay it." Meanwhile, just 2 floors up, Judge Celeste Brooks sat in the staff lounge, her legs still aching from the blow, but her mind far more restless than her body. She replayed the moment in her head, the kick, the silence, the cold fury in his eyes. She'd seen arrogance before. But not like that. That wasn't just rage. That was permission. Permission to act like the rules didn't apply. She opened her laptop and accessed the court's surveillance system. There were at least 3 cameras that should have captured the entire altercation from different angles. But when she clicked play, the hallway footage leading up to the courtroom, gone. Inside the courtroom, cut exactly 4 seconds before Sloan kicked her, then resumed 5 seconds after. It was seamless. Too seamless. Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just about Sloan losing control. Someone had helped cover it up. She stood up and shut the laptop slowly, her hand trembling not from fear, but from the quiet realization that this was no isolated incident. There was a pattern, and she'd just stepped into the middle of it. By noon, the courthouse had issued a report to the federal district office. Sloan's actions under normal protocol would trigger a formal federal review within 24 hours, but by 4 p.m., the phone still hadn't rung. No email, no inquiry, no response. At 6:45 p.m., Celeste called a trusted colleague in D.C. A low voice answered. "Celeste, I was told to sit on it. No one wants to touch this case right now." She didn't need to ask why. Power protects itself. Later that evening, the knock on her office door was soft, barely audible. When she opened it, a woman stood there. Mid-30s, weary eyes tightly holding a folder. "Judge Brooks," the woman said. "I'm Monica, Janelle's mother." Celeste welcomed her in and closed the door. Monica sat down, clutching the manila folder like it was her last shield. "I didn't know where else to go. I saw what he did to you. And I need to tell you something." She opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, a death certificate, and a faded photo of a smiling black man in a Marine uniform. "My husband's name was Ray Vaughn," she began. "In 2019, Detective Sloan arrested him, said he resisted. But no one ever showed me the footage. They booked him into county lockup. 3 days later, I got a call, said he had a medical emergency. That's what they called it." Her voice cracked, but when I saw his body, Judge, his face was swollen. His ribs were broken. My daughter Janelle, she's been terrified of cops ever since. Celeste's jaw tightened. "I filed a complaint. Twice. But they said there was no evidence of wrongdoing. They said my husband had a history of aggression. He didn't. He was a decorated Marine. Came home from Afghanistan just 6 months before it happened." Celeste leaned back, her mind racing. It all made sense now why Janelle had been crying, why she'd spit, why Sloan reacted like he owned the girl. He didn't see a child. He saw a threat, one that carried the face of a man he thought he buried in silence. Monica reached into her purse and handed Celeste one last document. It was a grievance letter, dated 2019, addressed to the Jefferson County Chief of Police. In the corner marked in red ink was a single word, dismissed. Celeste closed the folder gently. No more accidents, no more excuses. She stood, looked Monica in the eye and said, "This isn't over, and I promise you this time they'll listen." The courtroom incident had quieted, but Judge Celeste Brooks's mind hadn't. What happened wasn't just an act of rage, it was too targeted, too convenient. So she did something that most wouldn't dare. She followed her instincts. 3 days after the assault, she met in private with a digital forensics consultant, a woman named Dr. Marlene Grant. No court records, no emails, just a quiet handshake in the corner of an old library downtown. "I need you to pull every arrest Sloan has made over the past 10 years, Celeste said. "Name, race, age, circumstances. I want the truth, not the version they keep in the system." Dr. Grant didn't ask questions. She'd seen enough injustice in her own life to recognize when a judge wasn't seeking revenge, but revelation. 2 nights later, Marlene returned with a thick folder and eyes that refused to blink. 91% of his arrests are black individuals, she said. Nearly a quarter are minors, most of them pulled from neighborhoods where patrol wasn't even assigned. And here's the thing. Half the arrest records have irregular timestamps or were modified after booking. Celeste didn't speak. She didn't have to. The silence between them screamed louder than Outrage ever could. Across town, Officer Tyler Hill sat at his desk at Precinct 4, staring at a pink intake form. It was the arrest record for Janelle Carter. Something about it didn't sit right. Her booking time had been backdated, and the assault claim it lacked witness signatures, an uncommon omission. But it wasn't the paperwork that disturbed him. It was Sloan's handwriting across the top, "Make it stick." He remembered watching Sloan drag the girl into the courtroom barking like she was a criminal. Tyler had looked away then, but now he couldn't. He slid the folder into his drawer, glancing over his shoulder. The next afternoon, Celeste invited Tyler to meet not at the courthouse but a small coffee shop by Riverside Square. They sat outside, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows between them. Celeste didn't waste words. She simply passed him a printed sheet, one of Sloan's old cases. The name Andre Timmons, Monica's husband. Tyler froze. He remembered Andre. He'd been booked on a vague obstruction charge during a routine stop. Within a week, he was found dead in county custody. Official report said medical complication. But Tyler had heard whispers. Celeste watched his face shift from confusion to unease, then something deeper regret. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "Because you hesitated," she replied. "Because you still flinch at cruelty. That means something." He didn't respond, not at first, but when he finally looked up, his voice was hoarse. "Sloan," he said. "Andre fell in the shower." Celeste leaned back. "They always fall, don't they?" That night, Tyler couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thoughts racing. He thought about his brother-in-law, a retired officer who'd warned him, "There's the law." And then there's the silence behind it. He remembered the training sessions, the quiet jokes other cops made when black suspects came in. He remembered laughing once. God help him, he laughed. Now, he felt sick. Back at the courthouse, Celeste stood in her chambers. The file on Sloan spread open like a battlefield. Mugshots, reports, surveillance clips. Too many young faces. Too many scared eyes. And still, not enough. "We're missing something," she whispered. She needed more than data. She needed someone inside. Someone who could testify not just to numbers, but to the rot beneath the badge. And Tyler was cracking. She could feel it. At sunrise, Tyler made a decision. He called an old friend at Internal Affairs not to report not yet, just to ask questions. But the moment he mentioned Sloan's name, the line went dead. 2 minutes later, he got a text. "Be careful what you're digging. Some dogs don't bark, they bite." Tyler closed his phone slowly. This wasn't just about one dirty cop. It was a system that rewarded silence and punished truth. Celeste sat alone in her courtroom that evening, lights off, robe folded. She whispered almost to herself, the law was never meant to shield monsters. But it has, over and over. Her fingers tapped the edge of her bench. The next move wouldn't be legal. It would be personal. That night, long after the courthouse had gone quiet, Judge Celeste Brooks sat alone at her kitchen table, a glass of water untouched beside her. The lamp above her cast a soft halo, flickering slightly. Her hands, always so steady in court, now trembled as she unfolded the photograph she had kept buried at the back of her drawer for 6 long years. In the picture, Aiden stood tall in his fireman's uniform, grinning, arms around her waist, his helmet tilted back like he always wore it. His eyes were warm, full of life. She remembered that day clearly, how his laugh echoed through the firehouse kitchen, how he'd said, "Don't let the robe make you forget to dance, Judge Brooks." She smiled faintly, but Aiden Brooks never came home. 6 years ago, he'd been arrested just 2 blocks from their house. A traffic violation, the report said, followed by obstruction, then resisting. No body cam footage, no dash cam audio, just a quiet call from a sheriff's deputy that came after midnight. He collapsed in, holding, they said. Collapsed. Celeste had spent her life studying words, how people used them to bend truth. That word was always the same excuse. Collapsed. Like a man without a pulse, simply chose to fold. Sloane's name was buried in the incident log. He'd been the arresting officer. His report was barely 2 paragraphs long. Subject became verbally combative. That was all. No follow-up. No disciplinary note. Celeste hadn't fought then. She couldn't. She'd recused herself from everything, citing ethics, grieving in silence. She buried Aiden in a navy blue casket without a trial, without a real investigation. Just a folded flag and a file marked closed. But now she watched Janelle's small hands in handcuffs. She saw the bruise on her temple. And it all came flooding back. She stood up slowly and walked to the back of her home, into the room she hadn't entered in years. His study was untouched. His badge still hung on the wall. His boots sat by the door, polished and ready. On the desk lay the last book he'd read, spine bent halfway. Fire Doesn't Whisper, it was called. Celeste sat in his old chair. The leather creaked softly familiar. She opened the drawer beneath and took out the chain he always wore, small, worn, but strong. She clenched it in her fist. Outside, thunder rumbled. Inside, she whispered, "I let them silence me once. I won't do it again." She pressed the photo to her chest. This time I'm not walking away. This time I'm not letting them bury the truth. Back in her chambers the next morning, the mask was back on, cool, poised, unshaken. But the fire underneath had changed. It wasn't grief anymore. It was focus. She pulled out the report on Janelle's arrest and compared it side by side with Aiden's file. The wording, the patterns, even the timestamp errors. It was like déjà vu printed in ink. Then something caught her eye. A small detail in both reports, a field labeled Use of Force Justification. Both boxes were checked, but left blank beneath. Intentional omission or sloppy oversight. Either way, it meant something. It meant the system wasn't broken by accident. It was designed that way. Later that day, she visited Monica Carter, Janelle's mother. Monica opened the door with tired eyes, but invited her in with quiet dignity. Celeste sat on the old couch, pictures of Monica's husband still hanging on the wall, Andre smiling in every frame. Monica served tea without saying a word, then sat beside her. "I buried someone too," Celeste said finally. Monica's hands froze. His name was Aiden. They said he resisted. But I know what that really meant. Monica looked down. They always say that. They sat in silence, 2 widows of the same war generations apart. Celeste reached out, placing Aiden's old fireman chain in Monica's hand. "You're not alone," she said softly. "And your daughter won't be either." That night, as rain fell over Jefferson County, Celeste stood by the window watching the streetlights blur through the storm. She closed her eyes, her voice barely audible. "I know you're still with me, Aiden. I feel it." The silence didn't answer, but it didn't have to, because tomorrow the fight would begin. Not for revenge, but for truth. And this time, no one was walking away. It was just past sunrise when Monica opened her front door to check the mailbox more out of habit than expectation. Bills, a grocery flyer, and a small padded envelope with no name, no return address. Just her name typed on a plain white label, Monica Carter. Her hands hesitated. The envelope was light, but firm, something square inside. She stepped back in, locking the door behind her, then peeled the seal open on her kitchen table. Inside was a single USB drive. No note, no explanation, just silence. That afternoon in Celeste's chambers, the lights dimmed and the door was locked. The moment the video began playing, Monica's hand flew to her mouth. There was Janelle, terrified, cornered against the hallway wall, crying, not yelling, her body trembling. And then came Sloan, towering, scowling, approaching like a storm. He barked a warning. She backed away, sobbing. Her hands were up. Then he paused, glanced over his shoulder, opened a bottle of water and deliberately poured it over his uniform shirt. He turned back to the hallway camera and screamed, "She spat on me!" Seconds later, the handcuffs snapped onto her wrists. There was no spit, no aggression, just fear. Raw, innocent fear. Celeste pressed pause. No one spoke. This wasn't just misconduct. This was a performance, a weaponization of authority. And it had a script. Monica's voice finally cracked. "Why would someone send this to me?" Celeste's eyes narrowed. Someone who wants the truth seen, but can't show their face yet. 2 days later, the courtroom was packed press advocates, civilians. Even people who didn't usually trust the system came to see if it could still speak for them. Celeste entered, robe, crisp face, unreadable. But inside, she was steel. Sloan sat at the defense table, arms crossed, smug. When the footage was introduced into evidence, the room fell into an eerie stillness. And then the video played. Gasps echoed as the water trickled down Sloan's shirt on screen. One woman whispered, "Oh my God." Another man stood up, jaw clenched, fists tight. Sloan didn't even blink. When the video ended, Celeste leaned forward. "Detective Sloan," she said, her voice even. "Do you deny this footage?" He nodded once. "It's edited." A stir ran through the courtroom. Celeste didn't flinch. "Our forensic team confirms the file's integrity. No edits, no interruptions, no compressions. Would you like to suggest they're lying too?" Sloan's jaw tightened. "I've worked with dozens of tech units. Files can be made to say anything." Celeste stood. "Then let the public decide what they see here." Murmurs turned to motion. Phones were raised. Journalists typed frantically. But Sloan still didn't look shaken. That unnerved Celeste more than his denial. He wasn't defending himself. He was daring her. Daring the system to catch up. Later that evening, the video had already gone viral. Over 2 million views in 6 hours, hashtags lit up across platforms. Had Janelle. Did nothing. #truth in the tape. #Sloan lied. Public sentiment was boiling. But Celeste knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much bigger fire. She sat at her desk and played the video again, this time watching not just Sloan but the officer behind him, barely in frame. A glance, a twitch of discomfort. Tyler Hill. Her mind raced. Was he the one who sent it? Or was he just another piece in a game much older than both of them? Back at the station, Tyler sat in his car for over an hour before turning the key. He hadn't told anyone. He hadn't signed the footage. He hadn't even looked Celeste in the eye when he slipped the copy into the mailbox at 3 a.m. But when the video played in court and he saw Janelle's mother clasp her hands in relief just for a moment, he felt something shift in his chest. He wasn't ready to stand up. Not yet, but maybe soon. As for Celeste, She returned home that night to Aiden's study. She didn't turn the light on. She didn't need to. She stood by the window holding the USB drive in her hand. "You see that, my love?" she whispered into the dark. "They tried to bury her, too." The rain tapped gently on the glass, but this time, someone left the shovel behind. The party tape and the laugh. It was a Tuesday morning when Celeste walked into her chambers and noticed something odd. A small manila envelope sat neatly on her desk. No name, no markings, just her initials scribbled on the back. CB. She paused, glanced at her assistant's puzzled expression, then opened it slowly. Inside, another USB. No message, no instructions. But she knew exactly who had sent it. And this time, she braced herself. The audio file was labeled simply, "Third floor, April 10th, 8:43 p.m. She hit play. The static cleared after a second, revealing the unmistakable hum of clinking glasses and off-duty laughter. Voices, male and loud, surrounded by music and muffled jokes. Then came a voice she recognized too well, Sloane's. "That black judge, please one kick," and she folded like a lawn chair. "They think that robe makes them bulletproof." Laughter erupted. Another voice chimed in, this one deeper, a higher up by tone. "Long as those hallway cams malfunction again, she's got nothing." More laughter. "I say we take bets who's next." The little girl, her mom. One press of a record button, and they'll look like the ones resisting. The room fell cold. Celeste's hand hovered over the mouse. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just Sloane, it was a culture, and it sounded rehearsed. She called an emergency session that afternoon. Every seat in the courtroom filled before noon. No one knew what was coming, but everyone felt it. Sloane was there too, flanked by two attorneys this time, still confident, still leaning back like this was just another headline to wait out. Celeste entered calm and composed, a small speaker in hand. She addressed the room with no preamble. "This is an audio recording from a gathering of officers at the Jefferson precinct last week. It is unverified yet, but I ask the court and the people to listen and judge." She pressed play. The words echoed louder in the courtroom than they had in her office. "Folded like a lawn chair. Bulletproof robe. Take bets." The laughter, the mockery rang like a slap across every wall. Faces in the courtroom twisted, some in disbelief, others in disgust. A woman in the front row whispered, "That's what they really think of us." When the audio ended, silence followed. Heavy, suffocating. Celeste didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Within an hour, the media exploded. Jefferson PD drunk with power caught on tape. Officers laugh about assaulting black judge. Is justice even possible here? Cable news picked it up before sundown. Online forums dissected every second of the audio. Hashtags flooded the digital world. The laugh that exposed them. Not just one bad cop. Justice, or just us. But the most powerful wave didn't come from headlines. It came from the people. Protesters gathered outside Jefferson Courthouse holding signs that read, "We heard you. You think we're jokes, fire. Charge. Try." Local leaders who had stayed silent for weeks began to speak. Civil rights attorneys called for federal intervention. A former judge wrote an op-ed titled, "What We Let Happen When We Stay Quiet." Meanwhile, in the quiet of her chambers, Celeste sat with her back straight and her eyes closed. The weight of it all pressed in. It wasn't just about her anymore. It never really was. She whispered, "You see that, Aiden? You always said laughter was the last mask cruelty wears." And now, everyone had seen the mask fall, but she wasn't finished. Because while the public boiled with fury, Celeste was watching the silence behind the noise. The ones not reacting, the ones hiding in plain sight. And she knew this was just the second crack. The wall was still standing, but not for long. The courtroom felt colder that morning. Not because of the weather, but because of who was about to take the stand. Tyler Hill, the rookie cop, walked in stiffly, the weight of too many sleepless nights pressing on his shoulders. The gallery was packed. Reporters, community leaders, retired officers. Everyone who had something to lose or gain if the truth came out. Celeste Brooks sat upright, eyes, steady, hands folded. She didn't glare at Tyler. She didn't beg. She simply waited. The bailiff called him forward. "Detective Hill, you've been called to testify in the matter of Officer Sloan and the events surrounding Janelle Rhodes. Do you swear to tell the truth?" He nodded. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "I do." As he sat, his eyes swept across the room, landing briefly on Sloan, seated with his defense attorney, arms crossed, sneer etched deep. Then Tyler looked at Janelle, sitting beside her mother, clutching her sleeves. Tyler hesitated. His throat closed. Celeste leaned forward, voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Hill, you have the right to remain silent. No one will force you to speak. But if you choose not to, another child could be dragged across that courtroom floor next. And maybe no camera will catch it." The room stilled. No coughs, no rustling, just the hum of truth about to surface. Tyler reached into his bag, pulled out a folder tattered and marked by coffee stains and sweat. His fingers shook, but he opened it anyway. "These are the original arrest files from 12 separate cases involving Detective Sloan going back to 2016, Tyler said. "They were deleted from the precinct database last month. But I made hard copies, just in case." He laid the papers on the witness stand, each one labeled, one name after another. Faces of black men, women, children. Similar charges, almost identical wording. All from Sloan. "I used to believe silence made me neutral." Tyler continued. "That being quiet meant I wasn't part of the problem. But I was wrong. Silence protects power, not justice." A murmur rippled through the gallery. He swallowed, voice tightening. "In Janelle's case, I saw the charge before the arrest. I saw Sloan filling in the blanks before he even brought her in. It didn't feel right, but I said nothing. I let it slide because I didn't want to break the brotherhood." He looked up. "I'm breaking it now." Sloan bolted up from his seat. "You liar! You're just another pawn. Those files were tampered with." He lunged toward the stand. Officers rushed in. 2 deputies tackled him before he could reach Tyler. The folder tumbled to the floor, papers scattering across the tiles like confessions spilled too late. Celeste stood unflinching. Let him rage. The truth doesn't shake. The judge banged her gavel. "Order," Sloan's attorney whispered frantically, but Sloan shoved him away, wild-eyed. From the witness stand, Tyler kept speaking. His voice had grown stronger, steadier. "I joined the force to protect people. I thought that meant keeping the peace. But I've learned that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of justice." He turned to Celeste. "I don't know what happens next. But I'm here now, and I'm not backing down." The judge called for recess. As the court emptied, Tyler sat alone on the bench, head bowed. Reporters whispered his name, cameras clicked, but Celeste didn't approach. She simply looked at him. No smile, no words, just a nod. A nod that said, "You stood." That's enough for now. That afternoon, the public defender's office filed a motion to reopen all 12 cases. By sunset, 2 city council members called for Sloan's permanent removal. But that wasn't what Tyler remembered most that night. What he remembered etched into his mind was the look on Janelle's face as she left the courtroom. She didn't smile either, but for the first time her eyes didn't carry fear. They carried something else. Maybe it was belief. Maybe it was the beginning of trust. Maybe, just maybe, it was hope. The courtroom had never been this quiet. Judge Celeste Brooks sat perfectly still, her eyes sweeping across the packed room. The silence was sharp, not fearful, but expectant. As if the entire courtroom was holding its breath, waiting for something no one dared speak aloud. She set down her gavel, then she spoke calmly but with finality. Court is temporarily recessed. Please remain seated. At that exact moment, the double doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open, and in walked 4 federal agents, jackets marked FBI, stepping with precision that left no room for confusion. Behind them trailed a U.S. Marshal holding a thick envelope. Gasps scattered across the room like sparks. Sloane's smirk, still painted on his face from moments earlier, wavered. He turned, narrowed his eyes, and muttered, "What the hell is this?" One of the agents stepped forward, unfazed. "Detective Jack Sloane, under the authority of the United States Department of Justice. You are under arrest for obstruction of justice, falsifying public records, abuse of power, and multiple counts of aggravated assault under color of law." The room exploded, not with chaos, but stunned disbelief. "What?" Sloane barked. "You can't arrest me in my own house." "This isn't your house," the agent replied. "This is a court of law, and you're not above it." Sloane's face flushed red as 2 agents approached him. He took a step back, eyes darting toward the exit, but there was nowhere to run. "This is a mistake. I am the law here," he shouted, spit flying from his mouth. Celeste finally stood. Her voice was low, but every word cut with steel. "No, Mr. Sloane," she said. "You were a man who borrowed the law to brutalize the voiceless. That ends today." As the agent snapped the cuffs around his wrists, Sloane twisted, trying to pull away. "This is a setup. You're all part of her game." He pointed at Celeste, voice cracking. "She's trying to bury me because of her dead husband." Silence. Then a single voice from the gallery said, "No, you're the one who buried him." Another whispered, "It's finally happening." Suddenly, the gallery began to rise one by one like a wave of grief giving way to vindication. An elderly black man, tears running down his face, clutched his chest. A young woman hugged her sister. One mother held her child tighter than ever before. And then the applause began, soft, scattered at first, and then swelling. The room roared not with celebration but with release, with years of silence breaking all at once. Tyler Hill stood near the backhead, bowed. He watched his former superior being led away and didn't blink once. Celeste looked toward him just briefly. He nodded. Behind her bench, her hands trembled. She closed her eyes for a second and whispered inside her own mind, "Aiden." They heard us now. The marshal handed Celeste the indictment packet. "All 4 names are included, ma'am," he said. "We also retrieved wiped footage from the internal server. Forensics confirmed tampering from Sloane's terminal." She nodded, composed. "Thank you. We'll proceed with the judicial inquiry." As Sloane was dragged past the front row, he locked eyes with Janelle, who sat clinging to her mother's hand. For the first time, the rage in his eyes was replaced with something else, shame. But Janelle didn't flinch. She simply looked at him, calm and steady, and said softly, "You don't scare me anymore." Sloane froze as if those words hit harder than the cuffs ever could. Celeste stepped down from the bench. The courtroom wasn't done. She turned to the agents, then addressed the room, her voice firm. "This isn't justice finished. This is justice beginning. The law has been misused in this building for too long. That ends with transparency, accountability, and truth. And it continues with every voice in this room." A woman in the second row began to cry, not from sorrow, but from the weight of survival. A man whispered, "Took them 20 years, but they got him." Tyler Hill approached the judge quietly. His face still held doubt, not about the truth, but about the future. "I don't know if I deserve to wear the badge tomorrow," he said. Celeste looked at him not as a judge, but as someone who had also once been betrayed by the system she served. "You wore it today, for the truth," she said gently. "And that matters more than all the years you wore it in silence." He nodded slowly, exhaling for the first time in what felt like weeks. At the far end of the courtroom, press cameras started flashing, but no one looked at them. They looked at Janelle. They looked at Celeste. They looked at each other not as strangers, but as survivors' witnesses. And finally, believers that truth, no matter how long buried, will claw its way back to the light. The courtroom was still humming with the aftershock of what had just happened. Sloan was gone, cuffed and marched out like the disgrace he had long hidden beneath a badge. But the story wasn't finished. Not yet. After a brief recess, people began to trickle back into their seats. Some still wiped away tears. Others held their phones, texting family, calling friends. But there was something different now. The energy had shifted. No longer charged with fear or suspicion. It was something closer to hope. Judge Celeste Brooks returned to the bench, a rare softness in her eyes. She looked down at the front row where Janelle sat, shoulders square, hands folded in her lap like she'd been waiting for something. Celeste took a slow breath and said, "Before we close today's hearing, Janelle, if you have something to say, the floor is yours." The room quieted. Every head turned toward the little girl. Janelle didn't move right away. Her fingers twitched. Monica gently reached over, squeezing her hand. Celeste gave her a nod, not as a judge, but as a woman who understood what courage looked like. Then Janelle stood. Her frame was small, her steps careful. She walked toward the witness stand, her shoes barely making a sound on the polished floor. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at the mic. A soft murmur ran through the crowd. She was so young, too young for all this. But when she opened her mouth, her voice was anything but small. I used to think, she said, eyes not blinking, that if I just stayed quiet, they'd leave me alone. The room froze. Her voice was steady, but her fingers gripped the edges of the podium. I thought, if I didn't make waves, if I didn't speak up, then maybe they wouldn't look at me like I was something dangerous. Maybe they wouldn't hurt me. She paused, took a breath. But I was wrong. She looked out across the courtroom, eyes finding faces, faces of strangers, of survivors, of those who had sat in silence for years. "They don't leave you alone," she said. "Not because you're loud, but because of what you look like. Because they think no one will listen if you scream." A gasp, soft, somewhere near the back. "I cried that day," she said, her voice trembling now. "I was scared. I was just a girl. And he kicked me like I wasn't even human." Her hands trembled, but her eyes locked onto Sloane's empty seat, and her voice steadied again. "But that day didn't end me. It made me see." Janelle turned slightly, looking toward her mother. "I saw my mom hold me like I was the most precious thing in the world, even when I felt like nothing." She turned again toward Celeste. "I saw a woman who didn't raise her voice, but made the truth louder than any scream I ever could." Celeste's jaw clenched. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't wipe them. "I don't want to grow up scared of police," Janelle continued. "I don't want to walk into rooms thinking I have to shrink to fit inside them." She took a breath that made her whole chest rise. "I want to grow up to be someone like her, someone who makes them afraid of silence, someone who makes them afraid of the truth." And in that instant, the courtroom held its breath. There were no cameras flashing, no murmurs, not even a cough, just Janelle, just truth. After a long pause, she looked down. That's all I needed to say. And as she turned to step down, the first tear finally slipped from her cheek. The room erupted not in noise, but in emotion. 1,000 words caught in 1,000 throats. People who had come just to witness an ending now realized they were watching a beginning. Celeste stood not because protocol required it, but because that girl had just said what generations had held in their hearts. When Janelle returned to her seat, Monica pulled her close forehead to forehead. "You were born to break the silence," she whispered. By evening, clips of the testimony had already hit the news. CNN, the girl who faced the system and spoke for us all. NBC, 12-year-old's words spark national reflection. Hashtags flooded every corner of the internet. Justice for Janelle. Silence is not safety. Truth has a voice. But Janelle didn't care about the headlines. That night she sat at the kitchen table with her mom. The house was quiet. The world felt quieter too, like it had stopped long enough to actually listen. And Monica, watching her daughter sketch on a piece of notebook paper, finally said, "What are you drawing?" Janelle smiled, just a little. "A courtroom," she whispered. "But this time, it's full of people who aren't afraid." 1 year passed. The courthouse in Jefferson looked different now, not because the building changed, but because of who now walked through its doors. People held their heads higher. Some carried wounds that hadn't healed, but they carried them openly now. There was no more pretending, no more silence. And on a bright spring morning, the courtroom filled again, but not for a trial. This time it was something else entirely. Judge Celeste Brooks stood behind the bench, not in her black robe, but in a soft gray suit. Her eyes scanned the room. Every seat was taken. Reporters sat quietly in the back. A local choir hummed low near the windows. Then she looked toward the front row where Janelle sat, her hair pulled back, wearing a white blouse and a bright yellow pin. Celeste smiled. There are moments, she began, when the law speaks in statutes, articles, and amendments. A soft pause. And then there are moments, she continued, when the law speaks through tears and broken voices and little girls who refuse to be afraid. The room quieted. Celeste reached for the envelope in front of her. "Today, it is my great honor to present the first ever Aiden Brooks Honor Scholarship, named for my late husband, a man who believed in service even when the system failed him, to a young woman whose courage changed our court, our town, and maybe something bigger." She looked up. Janelle Howard. The audience stood. Janelle walked slowly to the front. Her steps measured, her eyes focused. As Celeste handed her the certificate, they held each other's gaze, not as judge and witness anymore, but as two women who had walked through fire and decided to build something from the ashes. When Janelle returned to her seat, Celeste glanced toward Monica, who sat just behind her daughter, hand over heart. That afternoon, a different kind of interview aired on national television. Celeste sat in a modest chair in front of a bookshelf, lined with old legal texts and faded photos, one of Aiden in uniform, another of a young Celeste on her first day in law school. The reporter leaned forward and asked Judge Brooks, "Many say what you did, what your courtroom became, has redefined how small towns see justice. But some wondered why you never showed anger, why you chose the law over rage. What would you say to that?" Celeste looked off to the side, almost as if the answer wasn't in her mind but somewhere in her memory. "They expected me to be furious," she said quietly. "They thought I'd slam a gavel out of vengeance. But I've lived long enough to know that rage burns fast, and I wasn't interested in smoke. I wanted light." The reporter paused. "Do you still believe in justice?" Celeste's lips curled into a soft smile. "I don't just believe in it," she said. "I practice it. Every day. And I teach it not through punishment, but through truth." Outside the courtroom, things began to shift. The police department was placed under federal oversight. Community-led panels began reviewing arrests. Officers attended mandatory civil rights training, not as a box to check, but as a standard for promotion. Monica, once just a mother too afraid to speak, was now leading those sessions. She stood in high school gyms, churches, town halls, teaching people how to ask questions, how to file complaints, how to be louder together than they'd ever dared to be alone. At the end of one session, a teenage boy raised his hand and asked, "How'd you know what to do?" Monica smiled. "I didn't," she said. "I just knew I couldn't keep waiting for someone else to do it." Back in Jefferson, Celeste sometimes walked the courthouse steps alone in the early morning before anyone arrived. She'd pause by the bronze plaque newly mounted at the entrance. It read, "This court is dedicated to the pursuit of justice, not just in letter, but in spirit. In memory of those silenced. In honor of those who spoke." She would run her hand along the edge of that plaque and whisper, not every time, but often enough to keep the vow alive, "We're still writing it, Aiden." And people noticed. One day, a little girl walked past the courthouse with her father. She stopped, pointed at the building, and asked, "Daddy, is that the place where truth lives?" He knelt beside her and said, "It is now. Before you go, take a breath. Because what you just heard wasn't just a courtroom drama. It was a story about truth, how it hurts, how it heals, and how when spoken out loud, it can shift the ground beneath our feet. It was about a young girl who chose courage over fear, a mother who found her voice, a judge who rewrote justice not with vengeance but with clarity. And in their journey, maybe you saw a piece of your own, or someone you love, or the kind of world you hope we're still building. If this story moved you even a little, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel, Mr. Max Stories. Here we don't just tell stories, we remember them, we feel them, and together, we make sure they don't get lost in silence. Your support means the world to us. It's what fuels our team to keep creating meaningful, honest stories that echo long after the screen fades to black. This is Mr. Max Stories, where memory meets justice, and where every voice still matters.